Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. Today we're going to be learning Maseches, Yevamos, Daf Vav. We're in the midst of a nuanced discussion about trying to find the following Mari Makom. How do we know that a mitzvah saseh is doche, a mitzvah lo saseh, when that lo saseh has kares? Yesterday, we spent time and found solutions to the slightly different case of a regular lo saseh. So we know that an aseh and a regular lo saseh, that the aseh will win. But how do things change when the lo saseh has an onish of kares? Do we assume the same thing, that aseh is still doche lo saseh, or not? Why is this important? Because the pasuk says in Chumash that in regards to Yibum, it says, and we learned that the word aleha was an extraneous word to teach us that a father is not allowed to marry his daughter in a case where his daughter was the remaining wife of a brother that had died. So normally yibum is you marry the now widowed wife, the widow who's now alive after the brother dies, but we don't allow that with a father and daughter. So why would we have ever thought that? So the Gemara is trying to say the reason we need that pasuk of aleha to let us know that a father cannot marry a daughter under those circumstances is because normally aseh dochelosa aseh in a case of kares. And that is what we're trying to prove. I know that we're on the top line of Vav Amud Aleph, but I would like to go back 6 or 7 lines to the bottom of Hamad Beis because it'll make it a smoother presentation. So that's what we're going to do. Ella, says the Gemara, 7 lines from the bottom of Hamad Beis, Ella Itzrich, we in fact do need the word aleha. We do actually have a reason to assume that aseh is dochelosa aseh in regards to kares. How do we know that? Because says the Gemara, salka daita chamina tesi mikibud avaim. We know that there's a mitzvah saseh of kibud avaim. Good. And what is it going to be up against? Let's see in the Brisa. Titania, yachol yehe kibud avaim doche Shabbos. Maybe we should say that it's doche Shabbos, that kibud avaim is stronger. Talmud lomar, ishimo ve'aviv tiro, ve'es Shabbos osai tishmoru, kulchem chayevim b'chvodi. So if a parent asks their child to be mechalel Shabbos, that's an aseh, doche losa aseh, b'makom kares. The halacha is not that way. My love wasn't the request of the parent to the child to amar le shechod li bashel li. The time of the cost of Rachmana Eshab Society Tishmoru. What did the father ask the child to do? Please go shecht an animal for me. Please go make me lunch. I need you to cook something for me. And the reason why we don't allow it is because the Torah gave us a pasuk of Eshab Society Tishmoru. What's implied from there? That only by Shabbos do we say that you would not listen to the parents, but by other case scenarios where there's an Isser Kares, maybe you would. Halav hachi, if not for the fact that in this mitzvah the pasuk was written as Shab Society Shmoru, we would assume dachi that an aseh is doche lo saseh. Shabbos is different. That's why by Shabbos we say Shab Society Shmoru. But in other areas of halacha, let's talk about our case now. By Yibum, I would have thought that aseh is doche lo saseh Shabbat Torah, even when there's a kares, and that's why we need the pasuk to say aleha to teach me that the father cannot marry his daughter through Yibum. So says the Gemara, no. You cannot learn aseh doche lo saseh afilu b'makom kares from this brisa. Why not? Because this brisa has a case scenario where a father asks a child to do something. The brisa posited that maybe what the father asked the child to do was something that had an Isser Kares attached to it, like shchita or bishul. Says the Gemara, lo. As we turn to the top of Vav Amud Aleph, lo, it's really lav de mechamer. What this person did is this person was told by his father, please make sure this animal moves on Shabbos. Now Rashi here details, Rashi Dibur Hamaskal Lav de Mechamer, he details on at the first line there, Lav de Mechamer Achar Behema Shehu Belav, de Lo Saseh Kol Malacha Ata Uvhemtecha. We know that our animals can't do anything either. Uvehai Lav, says Rashi, Leika Karis, there is no Karis in this case, de Lo Avid Maisa Begufe, because you never did anything. You pushed the animal a little bit. The animal's walking on its own carrying. You're not really doing the carrying. The animal's doing the carrying. So here's how the Gemara gets out of this. We might have thought that from this brisa on the bottom of Hamad Beis that we have a source of aseh dochelosa aseh b'makom kares, because maybe the father asked the child to do shchita or bishul. Says the Gemara, no. Maybe the father asked the child to do mechamer, and mechamer is a lav. Granted, it's an isser d'oraisa. You're not allowed to do it. You're not allowed to have your animals do work for you on Shabbos. However, by no means is there a chiyuv kares in that case, because as Rashi highlighted, you haven't done a ma'isa. And if that's true, then this brisa cannot prove that aseh is dochelos aseh b'makom kares, because the brisa doesn't tell us what exactly the father asked, and maybe what the father asked was a lav she'ein bo kares. Says the Gemara, that's a big problem. If in fact what you're saying is that the lav that was done in the brisa was something like mechamer, which is an isser d'oraisa without kares, then it's just a regular aseh dochelos aseh. Then why didn't it work? Why did the brisa say shab society shmoru? Says the Gemara, if in fact it's mechamer, which is a lav she'ein bo kares, so then why won't we say the regular rules of aseh dochelos aseh? Of course it should work. Ela dekai malan, we already know that we hold the aseh aseh v'dachilos aseh. Maybe we should say ligmor mehacha delo lidche. Maybe we should say that aseh dochelos aseh does not work. This should be a thorn in the side of all the work we did on Shabbos, because we said on Shabbos that aseh is dochelos aseh when it's a los aseh greda, when it's a regular los aseh. But if there's a kares, we don't know. And here, if in fact we're talking about mechamer, which is a lav she'ein bo kares, then maybe we should ask a kasha on everything we learned on Shabbos. It says the Gemara, we know that that's not true. Maybe we could argue that in this case it really is mechamer, and it's a regular case of aseh dochelos aseh. But what makes this case a little different? Says the Gemara, maybe Shabbos is more chamer than other areas of halacha. Maybe that's true. So says the Gemara, can't be. We have another brisa that's speaking about regular areas of halacha, not Shabbos, and this does not come up as a concern, as we'll see in a moment. The Tanya, we have a brisa that says, Yachal amar lo aviv hi tamei. If a father says to his son, who is a Kohen, you need to become tamei. Osha amar lo al tachzir. That when it comes to the mitzvah of hashavas aveda, the father says you're not allowed to return that item. Yachal yishama lo. Maybe the child should listen to the parent. Says the Gemara, absolutely not. Talmud Lomar, look where the pasuk is coming from. The pasuk is not talking about Hashavas Aveda or Tuma. Look at the pasuk. It says, Talmud Lomar, Ishimo v'aviv tiro v'eshab society shmoru. We quote from Shabbos. So we see that this brisa doesn't distinguish between the categories of halacha that one could break on Shabbos and any other aseh or losa aseh Shabbat Torah. So therefore, you cannot answer that the brisa at the bottom of the page that we tried to use as our source was talking about special, Shabbos is so special that even a lav she'ein bo kares, we'd say aseh is not dochelos aseh, can't be. Kulchem chayiv mechavodi. So what that does is it brings us back to our scenario, says Rashi. We're not going to read this Rashi, it's a little long, but if you want a good explanation of this Gemara in Rashi language, it's Dibur HaMaschil Ella, a little bit more than a third of the way down, almost halfway down. And Rashi says it must therefore be that the case we're talking about in our brisa is where the father asked the child to do something that has kares. So now let's repaint the picture. The brisa on the bottom of Hamud Beis is saying that a father asks a child to do shchita or bishul, which is a maisa that has kares. So maybe we should use this as a marimakom to teach us that by yibum also we would have thought that a father should marry a daughter because aseh is dochelos aseh, even by kares. Says the Gemara, no. No, there's something different about the case of Shabbos as it relates to the case of Yibum, and therefore you cannot learn from here. Yes, structurally and conceptually, this brisa is really a great source to teach us aseh dochelos aseh, even when that los aseh is kares. But you can't compare it to Yibum. Why? Because shekain hechsher mitzvah. Now, we're used to seeing the phrase of hechsher mitzvah as that which leads to a mitzvah, not the mitzvah itself. And in fact, here it does not mean that, and it's quite confusing. But here in this case, it means hechsher mitzvah is that you're actually doing the mitzvah. It's the exact opposite interpretation that we're used to. But that is what the Rishonim here explain. And what it means is as follows, that by this brisa for Shabbos, you're actually doing the thing that you're not supposed to do. But by Yibum, you could do something else. You could do chalitza. And because there's another way to execute, there's another way to navigate the scenario between a father and a daughter that doesn't entail kares, so therefore you cannot learn from this brisa. That's what the Gemara means, that ikal and mifrach, that you can't really compare the case of Shabbos where you're doing shchita or bishul to the case of Yibum, because you don't actually have to do the Yibum. That's what the pasuk in Chumash says that we started in Dvarim Perek Kaf Hey. There we saw that if you don't want to do the Yibum, you can do chalitza. So therefore, back to square one. We're about 12 lines down or so on Vav Amud Aleph, and we're still trying to find a marimakom. How do we know? And really, let's ask with a little more nuance. We already saw one source, but what's a source that's actually comparable to our case? Because Shabbos is not comparable to the case of Yibum, because Yibum has chalitza. So let's try again. Elasal kadaita amina. The reason why we need the word aleha in the Chumash to teach me that a father cannot marry his daughter in a case of Yibum is because I might have thought that Tesi, that I could learn mi binyan beis hamikdash. Maybe I could learn from the world of binyan beis hamikdash to the world of Yibum. How so? What's the case of binyan beis hamikdash? Says the Gemara, Tanya, Yachol yehe binyan beis hamikdash doche Shabbos. Maybe one would have thought that the building of the Beis Hamikdash overrides and trumps the laws of Shabbos. Talmud Lomar es Shabbososai tishmoru umikdashi tirau. Because everyone's obligated to build the mikdash and everyone's obligated to serve a Kadosh Baruch Hu, then there's no trump card on Shabbos, and one should stop building the Beis Hamikdash when Shkia hits or candlelighting on Friday afternoon. My lab is not this brisa speaking about parts of the malacha of building the Beis Hamikdash like bibona v'soser, things that are part of the 39 avos malacha that have kares, and therefore we would assume that this is a case of aseh dochelos aseh b'makom kares, and v'taima dekasav rachman shab sosai tishmoru. Only here do we say that it has to stop on Shabbos because the pasuk says Shab Sosai Tishmoru Halavachi, but in other cases where there is no pasuk to teach us an exclusion, then dachi. Then I might have thought that really the asay is dochel lo saseh, even if that lo saseh is the chiyuv kares. Good mari makom. So let's see if this compares. Says the Gemara, lo, not necessarily. Maybe what we're talking about is lav de mechamer. So it's so interesting. Obviously, this answer and the previous answer of the Gemara, the brisa about parenting, the brisa about the parent teaching his child to do malacha on Shabbos, these two answers could not have been taught in the same base medrash, because the Gemara is going to give the same answer, but we rejected the possibility that the answer was a lav de mechamer. That was impossible, but we're going to have to read through the same rejection again. The Gemara says, no, maybe the malacha that you're doing in regards to the binyan beis hamikdash is mechamer. You're motivating an animal to push and carry stuff on Shabbos, which we said is a lav, which has no kares. So maybe the brisa is not talking about kares to start with. And the Gemara goes through the same exact dialogue as we saw before. You can't say that. You can't say that this brisa is talking about mechamer. If in fact you say it's lav de mechamer, then we're back to where we started with the question we asked 15 lines ago, which is that if you say that this is not talking about a chiyuv kares, then it's a regular case of aseh dochelos aseh, and we already learned that aseh dochelos aseh works. Says the Gemara, we already know to asi aseh v'dachilos aseh. And if that's true, ligmar mehacha de lo dachi. Maybe we would then use this brisa, which we know that we don't. The Gemara is saying it kind of tongue in cheek. Maybe we would say that this brisa is going to teach us that aseh is not doche lo saseh, a regular lo saseh. So therefore, says the Gemara, b'chitema, like we saw earlier, b'chitema shani lave de Shabbos to chamira. Maybe the laws of Shabbos, even the laws that have no chiyuv kares, maybe Shabbos is more chamor, and therefore, because they're more chamor, you're right. Maybe aseh is not doche lo saseh by Shabbos. So then says the Gemara, that's not possible because the same brisa we saw above, which indicates certain isurim that a father requests of a child, and the child is not allowed to do it, and we learn from Shabbos. Says the Gemara, the Tanya, the same exact words we saw above. A father asks his Kohen son to become tameh, or any father asks his child not to do Hashavas Abeda. Would we say that the father should listen to his child? Absolutely not. So says the Gemara, you cannot say that this brisa about binyan beis hamikdash is talking about mechamer. If this brisa is talking about mechamer, so then it's aseh dochelos aseh, and that doesn't work out. It's not a regular aseh dochelos aseh. It's a los aseh that it must have kares, and therefore we're back to our question, which is maybe, just maybe, we have a mari makom to teach us that aseh is dochelos aseh in a makom kares. We're going to assume now that we are talking about the binyan beis hamikdash with bona and soser. You're doing one of the 39 malachos, and the brisa says it's not allowed. That's only over there by binyan beis hamikdash. But in most cases, maybe we would assume that aseh is dochelos aseh shabator when there is kares. So says the Gemara, the reason why we can't learn from binyan beis hamikdash back to yibum is for the same reason that we couldn't learn from kibbud avaim. Ela mishum de'ika lemifrach. You can't compare the malacha that's being done in order to build the Beis HaMikdash for a case of Yibum. Why not? Because it's exactly the same logic as before with the bishul and the shechita, where the father asked the child to be Mechal Shabbos. Over here, you might do bona and you might do soser. Those are chiyuvei kares. But says the Gemara, shekain, those are hechsher mitzvah. That's exactly the issur that you're supposed to do. But by Yibum, you have another option. It doesn't mean that you have to do Yibum, which carries with it all of the weight of a father marrying a daughter, which is exceedingly problematic. So, okay, Mar Makomos, maybe, but the Gemara says that maybe we can learn from Binyan Beis Hamikdash to Yibum. The Gemara says there Eino Domes Ela, you cannot learn from one to the other, because the Binyan Beis Hamikdash is Bona V'Soser. Those are the malachos themselves. That's the Hechsher mitzvah in that case. But here, what we're talking about by Yibum, they can always do Chalitza. So says the Gemara, that's duplicative. These two pieces of Gemara, as mentioned, they clearly were not learned in the same base measure, because they overlap too much in their errors, because we already saw you can't say these cases are not talking about kares. They have to be talking about kares. So says the Gemara, 7-8 lines from the bottom, Hechsher mitzvah, tepuk li mehasam. I already learned this idea of Hechsher mitzvah. What are you teaching it to me again for? Says the Gemara, Nachanami, you're absolutely right. Something's wrong here. And therefore, says the Gemara, how then do we learn the pasuk? How do we understand those psukim? If it's not for what you thought you were teaching me, that maybe, the first case or the second case, what then does the pasuk mean? Because it's not what you said it means. So therefore, says the Gemara as follows, really what the pasuk means, it has nothing to do with our case at all. So now we're going to take Yibum out of our head for just a moment. Says the Gemara, this pasuk teaches me something about as follows. Maybe a person should fear the Mikdash, fear the Beis HaMikdash. Talmud Lomar, the type of fear that you have for the Beis HaMikdash should be similar to Shabbos. One has to be careful by Shabbos. And one has to have fear by Mikdash. And the Gemara says on the last line of Avamad Aleph, just like when we talk about being Shomer Shabbos, Lomi Shabbos at Tomis Yare, you're not actually fearful of Saturdays. That's not what it means. You're supposed to fear a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So same thing over here. Vavamid Beis, second line. Af morha amura b'mikdash. Lo mi mikdash tamis yare. Ela mi mishehis ala mikdash. Maybe the case should be that we're not supposed to be fearing the actual building of the mikdash, but we're supposed to fear a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Ela mi mishezar ala mikdash. And what does that look like in halachic terms? How is one supposed to serve a Kodesh Baruch Hu, fear a Kodesh Baruch Hu in the base of mikdash? Ve'ezo hi mora mikdash. Says the Gemara, and this we've seen before in Brachos. We saw this in Brachos, and the Gemara says, "Lo yikanes adam beharabais b'makalo." A person should not enter harabais with their makel, with their staff, b'minalo, with their shoes, b'pundaso, with like a money pouch of some kind, ube'avak shal gabe raglav, with dirty feet. You should wash your feet before you enter the makam hamikdash. V'lo ya'asenu kapandaria, and you should not use it as a shortcut. So, okay, I have to go around the whole building. It's the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. I'd rather walk from out in the front door of the shul and out of the back door of the shul and walk right through the middle of the sanctuary. Says the Gemara, that's not allowed. And obviously one should not spit in a shul. So that should be obvious, mikal b'chomer, from all the other things. And the Brisa continues, I only know that these halachas apply on harabayis when Beis HaMikdash was still around. But bisman she'ein Beis HaMikdash kayim nebach, now the Beis HaMikdash is not around. So how do we know that it's really not right to go into the makam HaMikdash with these types of behaviors, or with these items, the makel, with a staff, or with your shoes, or with your money purse, whatever the case may be? So says the Gemara, Talmud Lomar, what does the pasuk teach me? Es shab society shmo. What do we see from this pasuk? Mashmira ha'amura b'Shabbos le'olam. Just like a person has to always keep Shabbos, even when there's no Beis HaMikdash, so too af more ha'amura b'mikdash le'olam. So that's what the Gemara says is the use of the pasuk, and it has nothing to do at all with Yibum or with our quandary that we're trying to answer about finding an authentic and quality marimakom for aseh doche lo saseh when that lo saseh is bekaretz. So the Gemara now moves to its third answer. We're about a quarter of the way down on Vav Amud Beis, and the Gemara says, "Elasal kadai tachamina teisi mehavara." I might have thought that maybe our case of aseh doche lo saseh, where the lo saseh has an isser kares, comes from the world of havara. Havara is one of the 39 malachos and is a very unique one at that, because the Torah explicitly stated that case of that malacha of havara. Titana Debei Rabbi Shmuel. Titana Debei Rabbi Shmuel teaches as follows: Lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvosechem. The Torah says you're not allowed to be boer eish in all of your encampments. Says the Gemara, Ma Talmud Lomar. What is this pasuk coming to teach us? Hooray, we know that the 39 malachos are us, or no matter what. We don't have all 39 listed. Why does the Torah go out of its way to teach this one? So says the Gemara, what do you mean? Ma Talmud Lomar? Everybody knows. And remember who's talking here. It's Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel. It's not, we might not know, but the Debei Rabbi Shmuel definitely knew what was going on here. And it's a famous machlokas. It's seen throughout Shas many times. Ma Talmud Lomar? What do you mean, what is it coming to teach? Ila Rabbi Yossi lelav. The reason why the Torah went out of its way was to teach us that Havara is a lav and maybe not kares. And either Rab Nasan l'chale. And according to Rab Nasan, it's coming to teach us that each of the 39 malachos are separately in their own space an Isser Kares. So here we have a big machlokas, Rabbi Yossi and Rab Nasan. Tanya, the Brisa says, Havar lalav yatzasati Rabbi Yossi, and Rab Nasan omer lacha. Like they have a machlokas as to how we learn out what this pasuk means. But what do you mean, ma Talmud lomar? That's like the ABCs. Everyone in school knows what's going on with this pasuk. It's either to teach us that fire is lalav yatzas, or it's to teach us that it's lachalek. Either to teach us that it's a lav, that it's not a chiyuv kares, or to teach us lachalek that each of the 39 malachos has their own isser kares. Big machlokas. So says the Gemara, no, that wasn't their question. When they said ma Talmud lomar, it wasn't the question of why did the Torah go out of its way to discuss Havara. That we know the answer to, that's for sure. Rather, what was going on? Says the Gemara, V'amar Rava, no, Tana moshavos kakashele. What bothered him was that it said moshavos, that it said b'chol moshvosechem. And says the Gemara beautifully and articulately, moshavos, ma Talmud lomar. What do you mean you're not allowed to light a fire in your camp? Michti, let's analyze. Shabbos chovas hagufi. Shabbos is an obligation on the body. It's an obligation on the person. The chovas haguf, no heges bein ba'aretz bein b'chutzlaretz. It doesn't matter where you are. If you have a chovas haguf, it doesn't matter if you're in the moshav and if you're not in the moshav. If you're in America, it doesn't matter where you are. Shabbos always applies. So why did the pasuk go out of its way to say lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvosechem? Just say lo sevaru eish b'Shabbos. What's with moshvosechem? It's a great question. We know the pasuk by heart already. Why did the Torah say that? Of course, it's going to be asur no matter where you are. It doesn't make a difference at all. So it says the Gemara, Moshavos, Tekasav Rachmana b'Shabbos lamali. Why does the Torah taka say Moshavos? Why does it say Lo Sevaresh b'chol Moshvosechem Yom HaShabbos? So answers the Gemara halfway down on Vav and Beis. We're going to wrap around till about 10 lines down on Zayin and Aleph, and then we'll stop. Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, because of Rabbi Shmuel, Amar Talmud Echad, that one of his students taught the following. Because it says in Chumash, if a person has done a sin and he has a judgment of death and he is to be killed, Shomea ani, I might have thought bein b'chol bein b'Shabbos, that a person, of course, he could receive his capital punishment during the week, but havamina, that maybe it would have been true even on Shabbos. How would I weave in the pasuk of mechalaleha mos yumas to this din? So it says the Gemara, b'shar melachos. Yeah, that applies to all the other melachos, all the other things that you can do wrong. You're right; those things are mechalaleha mos yumas. However, chutz mi misas bezdin, the Gemara says that misas bezdin can be meted out even on Shabbos. The Brisa continues. But maybe we should entertain the other possibility that afilu misas bezdin, that maybe even misas bezdin should not be allowed on Shabbos. And umani mekayim v'humas. And what then does it mean when the pasuk says that he should be put to death? It means b'chol v'lo b'Shabbos. That maybe the Brisa entertains the possibility that it's only talking about weekday and not on Shabbos. And then the Gemara flips again. Well, maybe not. No, that's what lo sevaru eish means. Why does it say moshvosechem in the pasuk? Lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvosechem, to teach you that you're not allowed to kill someone on Shabbos of capital punishment. That's what the word moshavos comes to teach us. What about another pasuk that uses the word moshavos as well? Ulahalan, the Torah uses another word. Ulahalan uomer v'hayu eile lachem lichukas mishpat ladorosechem b'chol moshvosechem. Ma moshavos ha'amurim lahalan bevezdin, just like the pasuk we learned previously. When it said moshavos was talking about bezdin, so too af moshavos ha'amurim kan bevezdin. V'amar rachmana lo sevaru, and the Torah says you're not allowed to do any biur, you're not allowed to light a fire. My love, and here's where we get back to the argument of maybe we actually have our case of an aseh dochelosa aseh b'makom kares. My love, Rabbi Nasan hi d'amar lechelek yasasa, that maybe the pasuk of lo sevaru eish b'chol moshvosechem, the reason why the first part of the pasuk was there was to teach us that each and every avera and Shabbos is an isser kares. V'taima, and the reason over here why we won't kill this person is because the kasav rachmana lo sevaru. Here, the Torah goes out of its way to prevent us from killing the person. But under other circumstances, halav hachi, without having a pasuk, we would very much assume that aseh is doche lo saseh, afilu b'makom kares dachi. So that's a Gemara's lengthy argument. It took 20 lines for the Gemara to articulate that idea. That maybe through this brisa, we can see a possibility that because the only reason we don't kill this person is because the pasuk says lo sevaru, and it's Shabbos, and you can't kill someone on Shabbos, that's kares. So maybe we should assume aseh is docha lo saseh, filu b'makom kares dachi, that maybe we should say that in other cases we would have the aseh override. Says the Gemara, no, that's not correct. You assumed that the pasuk was being learned like Reb Nassan, who says that we were talking only about kares. But maybe, says the Gemara, it's Reb Yossi. We're second line into the wide line, 6 lines from the bottom. Maybe this brisa is referring to Reb Yossi. Says the Gemara, it's possible that it's Reb Yossi, but v'tehavi nami Reb Yossi can be either of them. Because Eimar da'amar Reb Yossi, even according to Reb Yossi, who says that havara is lelav yotzas, that havara, if you just light a match, that he'll say it's an Isser Doraisa, but maybe it's not Kares. Says the Gemara, Eimar da'amar Reb Yossi havara lelav yotzas havara gredasa. When does he say that a fire in and of itself, just lighting a fire, is going to be an Isser Lav without Kares? That's havara gredasa. But what if you're melting the lead to kill someone for the capital punishment? Says the Gemara, but havara de bezdin bishel psilahu. You're literally cooking what they refer to here as a psila, which is a rod of lead of some kind that once it heats up and melts, then you pour it down nebuch. That's what skila is. It's terrible. So says the Gemara, I'm sorry, that's what sreifa is. So that's terrible. But then even Rabbi Yossi would agree in that case that there's kares. So says the Gemara, Rav Sheshes, Mali Bishel Psila, Mali Bishel Samanin. Doesn't make it, once you're cooking something and it's not just a fire, even Rabbi Yossi would agree that there's Nisr kares. So says the Gemara, Amara Rav Simi Bar Ashi, no. I know you think from here that it should be aseh doche lo aseh because it's kares, and the aseh is only not doche because of the pasuk, but in other cases maybe aseh doche lo aseh b'makom kares. But Rav Simi Bar Ashi says you're looking at the brisa all wrong. And he says, "Hai Tana, lo mishum de'asi aseh v'dachi lo aseh, ela mishum de'maisi mikal v'chomer." He says there's another subtext to this brisa that we've been looking at, and let's get into this this different understanding, completely divergent understanding of our brisa that has nothing to do with aseh doche lo aseh. And when we get to the end of this, we'll end the daf today not knowing still what the Mari Makom is for Aseh Doche Lo Aseh B'Makom Kares. What is the pivot here that Rav Simi Bar Ashi says? What is the other way to understand this brisa? Says the Gemara V'Hachi Kamar, 2 lines from the bottom of Amud Beis. Mo'ani Mekayim Echalaleha Mos Yumas. How do we understand the brisa, the pasuk in Chumash, when it says that those who desecrate Shabbos, that they will be killed? Bishar Melachos Chutz Mimisas Bezdin. He says what that means is that you're going to be chayiv misa most you must for all other malachos, but misas bezdin in this version of the beginning of the brisa would be allowed. Aval misas bezdin dach Shabbos mikal v'chomer. The reason we know that misas bezdin can trump Shabbos is from a kal v'chomer, and that brings us to the top of Zayin Amud Aleph. Let's continue. What is the kal v'chomer that logically indicates to me that misas bezdin can happen on Shabbos? Very svaradik. And here's what the Gemara says: Uma avoda shehi chamura v'docha Shabbos. To do the avoda in the Beis Hamikdash is very chamur. You're shechting animals, you're cooking animals v'chulei, and that's docha Shabbos. So then, ritzicha docha osa. We know that we're allowed to kill someone. We're allowed to kill a kohen who goes off the derech, and that's doche the avoda. Shene'emar me'im mizbechiti kachenu lamus. That even he can't be on the Beis, he can't be on the mikdash, but if he's just doing the avoda but not on the mikdash, he can be killed. So says the Gemara, then all the more so Shabbos shenitches mibnei avoda eino din shetehei ritzichas doche osa. Then there too we should see that the rechita of the misas bezdin should work. So this is the kal v'chomer. It says the Gemara, fine, that's really a great kal v'chomer, but it does put the rest of the brisa into a difficult state. How then do we understand 4 lines down? Umay o eno dika amar. Remember the Gemara, the brisa on the previous page on Vav Amud Beis flip-flopped. Oh, well, maybe it's not Mechal Shabbos. Maybe it is Mechal Shabbos, back and forth. So says the Gemara, what was umay eno? Says the Gemara, hachi kamar. I have a great way to explain it. Kvuras meis mitzvah tochiach. That's really what's going on. There's a very absence, is almost like a chasuri mechzor b'hachik tani. A lot of information is missing here. And really what the Gemara is saying is that we're talking about a case of meis mitzvah. We'll prove. Shedoches ha'avoda ve'eno doches ha'Shabbos. You can't bring a raya from ritzicha, from a murder that's being done for bezdin. You can't bring a raya because I'll show you a case scenario where something is docha the avoda, but not Shabbos, and that ruins your kal v'chomer. What's that? Mace mitzvah, which is docha the avoda, but it's not docha Shabbos. Okay, but then the brisa flips again, hadar amar, and then the Gemara says, well, hold on 1 second. Kvuras mace mitzvah tidcha Shabbos mikal v'chomer. Maybe we should assume that mace mitzvah is going to violate Shabbos, that you're allowed to bury a mace mitzvah on Shabbos. Uma avoda she docha Shabbos. Just like we know that the avod of the Beis HaMikdash is docha Shabbos, kvuras meis mitzvah, and we know that kvuras meis mitzvah is docha Shabbos, docha osa, mi v'la'achoso. This is based on a pasuk. The pasuk says, le'aviv u'le'imo le'achiv v'la'achoso lo yitama lahem b'mosam ki nezer elokav al rosho. And not here, but elsewhere, the Gemara learns v'la'achoso is to teach us that the meis mitzvah is docha Shabbos, and Shabbos nidche mibnei avoda, and Shabbos is going to be pushed away from avoda. So eno din shetehei kvuras meis mitzvah doche osa. We should therefore assume that meis mitzvah should override. Talmud lomar, what do we see from the Torah? Lo sevaru, that you are not allowed to do a meis mitzvah on Shabbos. So this is a whole new interpretation of the brisa. This whole brisa started out with havara, and the Gemara gave a lengthy explanation as to why we thought that maybe havara was a great example of aseh doche lo saseh b'makom kares. The Gemara says that's only according to version 1 of the brisa. But Rav Simi Barashi had a whole different version of the brisa based on the various kal v'chomers and the subtext of meis mitzvah and avoda and all the kal v'chomers therein, and therefore the brisa is not discussing this at all. So therefore, we're left today with the following: we tried 3 answers. We tried kibud ava'im, we tried binyan beis hamikdash, and we tried havara to prove the idea that aseh docha lo saseh b'makom kares. We have been unsuccessful thus far. We will pick up on trying to figure out the answer to this question tomorrow night. We'll stop right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.